I stood in the middle of that empty church at 3 in the morning, 3 photographs trembling in my sweaty hands, when I felt a presence behind me. I turned slowly and saw a woman in a blue cloak, with the most serene eyes I had ever beheld. She didn't say a word, just extended her hand, and in that moment, all my convictions as a staunch atheist crumbled like a house of cards. I, who had spent 42 years shouting that God was a figment of the human imagination, was face to face with something I couldn't explain with all my engineering logic. Let me explain how I got there, because this story began long before that life-altering dawn. My name is Charles, and I've always been a show-me-the-evidence kind of guy. A civil engineer by trade, I dealt with calculations, structures, reinforced concrete, things you can touch, measure, prove. My wife, Mary, used to joke that I was more skeptical than Doubting Thomas, and she wasn't wrong. When my mother-in-law talked about miracles, I rolled my eyes. When the neighbors gossiped about apparitions, I'd let out an ironic chuckle. To me, religion was a psychological crutch, period. This mentality followed me throughout my adult life. I married Mary in a civil ceremony, baptized my children only to please the grandmothers, and whenever someone brought up faith, I'd change the subject or excuse myself. It wasn't disrespectful, understand, just I didn't see the point. I believed that when we died, it would be like switching off a light bulb. Simple as that. But life has a way of surprising you, doesn't it? Sometimes it catches you off guard just when you think you have everything under control. It all started at the beginning of March last year. I was going through a rough patch at work. The construction company I co-owned was facing a serious financial crisis. Mary had lost her job. My kids, Peter and Anne, were in high school spending a fortune on college prep courses, and the bills just kept piling up. Stress was consuming me from the inside out. I'd wake up at 5 in the morning with a tight chest, thinking about overdue bills, employees to pay, and projects that weren't getting off the ground. It was on one of those Tuesday mornings, precisely at 7:43, I remember because I was looking at the clock when it happened, that I found the first envelope. I was leaving for work when I almost tripped over it. A thick, ivory-colored envelope, sealed with old red wax. I found it strange because it had no name or address, only the initials MS stamped in the corner in elegant, almost feminine script. My first reaction was to look for whoever had left it. I looked around, asked the doorman, but nobody had seen anything. I went back upstairs, intrigued, and opened the envelope at the kitchen table while Mary made coffee. Inside was a single antique photograph, the kind with serrated edges, yellowed with age. The image showed a young woman, in a blue veil, with her hands clasped to her chest, and a look that seemed to pierce the photo and stare directly at me. "What a strange photo," Mary commented over my shoulder. "It looks like Our Lady. Some devotee must be trying to convert you." She laughed, but I didn't find it funny at all. There was something about that look that deeply unsettled me. I can't quite explain it, but it was as if those eyes knew all my fears, all my financial anxieties, all my disbelief. I felt a strange tingling in my fingertips when I held the photo, like a very weak electric current. I tried to ignore it, but all day that image stuck in my mind. At the office, while reviewing blueprints and budgets, I found myself thinking about that woman. Who was she? Why would someone send me a photo without explanation? What kind of joke was this? At night, when I got home, Mary was unusually quiet. She was stirring her dinner with a worried expression I knew well. "Honey, I need to tell you something," she said, without looking at me. "I called the school today to settle Peter and Anne's overdue tuition fees. They said that if we don't pay by Friday, the children will be barred from taking their exams." I felt the world crashing down on me. I was already 3 months behind on school fees, 2 months behind on condo fees. My credit card was maxed out, and on top of that, 2 of the construction company's biggest clients had canceled their contracts the previous week. I was in such a deep financial hole that I couldn't see the light of day anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the porch, smoking cigarette after cigarette, calculating and recalculating the bills in my head. Around 3 in the morning, when I finally decided to go to bed, I found another envelope under the front door. The same paper, the same red wax seal, the same mysterious initials. This time there were 2 photographs. The first showed the same woman in the blue veil, but now she was kneeling before a man who looked desperate, with torn clothes and a face marked by anguish. The second photo was even more impactful. The woman was in what looked like a hospital or nursing home, touching the forehead of a sick child, with an expression of compassion that made me swallow hard. On the back of each photo were handwritten phrases, in the same elegant script as the envelope. "It doesn't matter how much you doubt, and she always intercedes for the afflicted." My heart pounded. Who was doing this to me? How did they know I was going through difficulties? I started to suspect everyone around me, neighbors, employees, even family members. Someone was playing games with my crisis situation, and it made me furious and scared at the same time. The following days were a psychological torture. Every morning I expected to find another envelope, and every morning there it was, punctually, with more photographs of the same mysterious woman. In one, she was distributing food to poor families. In another, she was comforting a weeping woman, always with that serene gaze, always with her hands outstretched in a gesture of welcome. The dates on the back of the photos began to form a pattern that intrigued me. August 15, 1942, September 12, 1965, April 3, 1980, May 21, 1998, December 8, 2010. I, who have always been methodical, started researching these dates on the internet during sleepless nights. That's when I discovered something that chilled me to the bone. All those dates corresponded to historical records of Marian apparitions in our city and region, things that I, in my skepticism, had always ignored or ridiculed. Accounts from ordinary people who claimed to have seen Our Lady in moments of great collective affliction. The 1942 date corresponded to the period of World War II, when several families in the city reported visions of a woman in blue who had given advice on how to hide their children from forced recruitment. In 1965, during a terrible drought that ravaged the region, there were rumors that the same figure had appeared to farmers, indicating where they would find water. And so on. I didn't want to believe it, but the coincidences were too disturbing to ignore. I started looking for older people in the city, long-time residents, who could tell me about these events. Discreetly, without revealing my true interest, I spoke with Mrs. Rose, an 80-year-old woman who lived in the building next door. "Oh son," she said, when I casually mentioned the events of 1965, "I was a young girl back then. My father was desperate because our family well had completely dried up. One night he dreamt of a very beautiful woman, in a blue robe, who showed him a specific spot in the backyard. The next day, he dug exactly where she had indicated, and found a spring that never dried up again. The water from that well quenched our family's thirst for decades." I listened to dozens of similar stories, always the same description: a woman in a blue veil, of indescribable beauty, who appeared in moments of greatest despair to offer hope and guidance. And always, the people who saw her emerged transformed from the experience. It was around this time that someone from our channel suggested that you should subscribe to follow more stories like this, because believe me, what you're about to hear goes beyond any logical explanation I could imagine. 2 weeks had passed since the first envelope, when something extraordinary happened. I was in the office, on a Friday afternoon, trying to negotiate a longer deadline with the bank to pay the company loan, when my cell phone rang. It was Mary, crying with happiness. "Charles, you won't believe it. Remember Mr. Anthony, that client who canceled the project last month? He just called saying he wants to resume everything. And that's not all. He said he has 3 friends interested in building too, and that a very polite woman contacted him, specifically recommending your work." I was shocked. Mr. Anthony was a serious businessman, owner of a supermarket chain, who had canceled the construction of an industrial warehouse because, according to him, he had lost confidence in the market. Now he was backtracking, and even bringing in new clients. How did he describe this woman who contacted him? I asked, with a strange feeling in my chest. He said she was a very elegant lady, about 50 years old, dressed in light blue, with a very serene way of speaking. She didn't say where she knew you from. She just guaranteed that you were the most honest and competent professional in the city. My blood ran cold. None of our acquaintances fit this description, and I was sure I didn't know anyone who could recommend my work to Mr. Anthony so specifically. That night, when I got home, the envelope was already there, as if it knew I needed more answers. This time there was only one photograph, but it left me breathless. The image showed the woman in the blue veil in profile, and in the background, blurred but recognizable, was the office where I had been that afternoon. The date on the back was from the previous day, March 14, 2024. My hands trembled so much that I almost dropped the photo. How was it possible? That photo had been taken less than 24 hours ago, in my workplace, but the woman in the image seemed to be the same as in the old photographs, with the same youthful and timeless appearance. I began to question my own sanity. Was the stress making me hallucinate? Was I having a nervous breakdown? I scheduled an appointment with a psychologist, had medical tests done, but everything was normal. The doctor said I was just tired and needed to reduce my anxiety, but the envelopes kept coming, and along with them inexplicable things started happening in my life. In addition to the return of Mr. Anthony, other former clients started looking for me. Projects that had been stalled for months suddenly received approval from the city hall. Suppliers who had tightened payment terms started offering flexible deadlines again. In 3 weeks, the company's financial situation went from chaotic to stable. I managed to pay off the children's overdue tuition, bring the condominium fees up to date, and even had money left over for a small emergency fund. Mary was euphoric with the change, but I felt increasingly uneasy. I was sure that those mysterious envelopes were connected with the improvement of our situation, but I couldn't understand how or why. It was a Wednesday, almost a month after the first envelope, that I received the most unsettling message of all. This time it wasn't a photograph, but a small piece of paper with an address handwritten on it. Said Rosary Church, Flower Street, 247, Friday, 3 a.m. Mine. Come alone, and bring all the photographs. St. Rosary Church was located in the historic downtown area, on a narrow, dimly lit street. It was an old building, from the 18th century, that I knew by sight, but had never entered. Throughout Thursday, I was torn between curiosity and fear. Part of me wanted to solve this mystery once and for all, but another part whispered that I should ignore the summons and get on with my life, which had improved so much in recent weeks. On Friday morning, I woke up at 2:30 a.m. without needing an alarm clock. Mary was sleeping soundly beside me. I threw on some clothes, grabbed all the photographs I had received, and left the house like a sleepwalker. The street was completely deserted when I arrived at the church. The building seemed even more imposing in the dark, its Gothic towers silhouetted against the cloudy sky. To my surprise, the main door was ajar, as if someone knew I was coming. I entered slowly, sensing a faint scent of roses that contrasted with the smell of old wax and wood that dominated the atmosphere. The nave was bathed in a golden twilight, illuminated only by the flickering candles before the high altar. My footsteps echoed on the stone floor as I walked toward the front pews. It was when I reached the altar that I felt a presence behind me. I turned slowly, my heart pounding so hard, it felt like it would burst from my chest, and that's when I saw her. A woman of medium height, enveloped in a blue cloak that seemed to glow with its own light. Her face was young, but her eyes held a depth that spoke of ages and ages of compassion. She was exactly the same person in the photographs, not just similar, but identical, with every detail perfect, from the soft wrinkles around her eyes to the delicate way she clasped her hands. "You came," she said, and her voice was like music, soft yet penetrating. "I knew you would." I was paralyzed. Part of my brain screamed that it was impossible, that I was hallucinating, that I should run from that place. But my feet seemed glued to the floor, and my eyes couldn't tear themselves away from that serene face. Who are you?" I managed to stammer. "You know who I am," she replied, taking a step toward me. "You always knew, even when you screamed that I didn't exist." The photographs in my hands began to tremble, not because of my nervousness, but as if they had a life of their own. One by one, they began to emit a soft golden light, and the dates on the back became visible, even in the darkness of the church. These are just some of the times I've been present in the lives of the people of this city, she continued, pointing to the photos. There are thousands of others that were never recorded, thousands of prayers answered, thousands of hearts comforted. But I never believed in you, I murmured, feeling warm tears roll down my face. I always said you were an invention. She smiled, and that smile was like the sunrise after a stormy night. And do you think that stopped me from taking care of you and your family? Do you think I only help those who believe in me? At that moment, I understood a truth that completely changed my worldview. It didn't matter whether I believed or not. During all those years of skepticism, denial, and mockery, she had been there, silently caring for the people I loved, interceding for us, even when I spat blasphemies against her existence. Why did you reveal yourself to me now? I asked, still trembling. Because you were lost in your own intellectual arrogance, she said, but without a tone of reproach. You had forgotten that there are things in the world that cannot be measured with a ruler or calculated with formulas. You needed to learn that faith is not the absence of reason, but the acceptance that reason has limits. She came closer, and I could feel an indescribable peace emanating from her presence. It was as if all my fears, all my anxieties, all my financial distress of the past months simply dissolved into the air. The business that came back, the clients who returned, the conditions that improved, was all that your intercession? I asked. I only opened a few paths, she replied. The rest was the result of your own effort and professional honesty. I don't perform miracles where there's no human merit. We were silent for a few moments. I was trying to process everything, reorganize my worldview, accept that I had been wrong for so long. What do you want from me now? I finally asked. I want you to live with an open heart, she said. I want you to see that the world is full of small miracles disguised as coincidences. I want you to teach your children that there is more between heaven and earth than your philosophy can explain. She extended her hand toward the photographs, and they suddenly transformed into small white rose petals that fell gently to the church floor. You don't need them anymore, she said. The memory will be engraved in your heart. When I blinked, she was gone. She didn't fade away or walk off. She simply wasn't there anymore. I was alone in the church, with the scent of roses still floating in the air, and the white petals scattered at my feet, as proof that it had really happened. I walked home in a daze. Mary woke up when I entered the bedroom, and asked where I had been, but I couldn't explain. How could I tell her that I had encountered Our Lady in an empty church? How could I describe an experience that defied all the logic I had followed for 4 decades? In the days that followed, I began to notice things that had always been there, but that my skeptical mind had refused to see. The gratuitous kindness of the elderly neighbor who always asked about our family. The way my children, even as teenagers, still sought me out to talk about their fears and dreams. Mary's quiet dedication, who had endured all the difficult times without ever losing faith in our family. I started attending St. Rosary Church on Sundays, not as a fanatical convert, but as someone who had learned to recognize the sacred in everyday life. I didn't pray for grandiose miracles, but gave thanks for the small graces that had always been present in my life. My relationship with Mary deepened in a way I didn't know was possible. When I told her about my experience at church, she showed no surprise. She just held my hand and said, "I always knew you'd understand one day." I discovered that she had made promises during all the most difficult moments of our married life. When she was pregnant, and we had complications during the pregnancy, when Peter was born prematurely, and spent weeks in the neonatal ICU, when Anne had that serious pneumonia at age 5, when the construction company almost went bankrupt for the first time 8 years ago. In all those moments, Mary had knelt in a church and prayed for our family's protection. "Did you really believe our achievements were just the fruit of your effort?" she asked me in one of those conversations, with a sweet smile. "Honey, there's a safety net around us that you never wanted to see." I started paying attention to the small signs that had always been there. The way things fell into place at the right moments, the right people appearing exactly when we needed them, the solutions that arose just when everything seemed lost. They weren't coincidences, they were small, everyday miracles that my intellectual arrogance had classified as chance occurrences. My company not only recovered but prospered in a way I had never imagined, not because I became a better professional overnight, but because I started working with a different energy. When you recognize that you're not solely responsible for your success, when you accept that there's a higher power working in your favor, you work with less anxiety and more serenity. Clients noticed this change. They commented that I seemed more confident, calmer, more focused. What they didn't know is that I had stopped carrying the weight of the world on my shoulder. I had learned to surrender to God what I couldn't control, and to dedicate myself wholeheartedly to what was within my reach. Peter and Anne also noticed the transformation. During a family dinner, Peter commented, "Dad, you've been more present lately, less worried, you know." And Anne added, "It's true, you even laugh more." They were right. I had rediscovered the ability to marvel at simple things. Mary's smile in the morning, my children's spontaneous hugs, the sunset that painted our porch golden at the end of the afternoon. Small moments that before went unnoticed in the rush of financial and professional worries. Today, almost a year after that night at St. Rosary Church, I can say that I am a completely different man. I haven't become a devotee nor abandoned my profession to become a preacher. I'm still an engineer. I still deal with calculations and structures, but now I recognize that there's a divine mathematics that governs the universe, and that goes far beyond the equations I learned in college. I learned that faith is not the enemy of reason, but its wisest companion. That believing in miracles doesn't mean abandoning critical thinking, but accepting that there are phenomena that our science cannot yet explain. That recognizing the presence of the sacred in the world is not a sign of intellectual weakness, but of humility and wisdom. I still receive envelopes from time to time, but now they arrive at different times. When someone close is going through difficulties, when I need to make an important decision, when my heart is restless for some reason, always with a simple message, always with subtle guidance, always at the exact moment I need it. The last time was 2 weeks ago, when I learned that my younger brother was having serious marital problems. The envelope contained only one sentence: "Invite him to lunch on Sunday." I followed the advice, and during that lunch, he opened up completely about his marital anxieties. We were able to have a heart-to-heart conversation for the first time in years, and today, he and his wife are in couples therapy and regaining their lost harmony. If you are watching this account and identify with the skeptical man I once was, I want to leave a message: don't be afraid to question your own certainties. The world is much larger and more mysterious than our minds can comprehend. There is a higher intelligence that takes care of us, even when we don't believe in it, even when we deny it, even when we rebel against it. I'm not here to convert anyone, or to defend a specific religion. I'm just sharing my personal experience of discovering that the sacred is much closer to us than we imagine. It manifests itself in the gratuitous kindness of people, in the synchronicity of events, in the strength we find in the most difficult moments, in the love that unites families, in the hope that is reborn when everything seems lost. Today, when I enter a church, I'm no longer the man who mocked others' prayers. I'm someone who's learned to give thanks for blessings received and to pray for the protection of the people I love. When I see someone kneeling before an image, I no longer feel intellectual disdain, but a deep understanding that this person is connecting with something far greater than themselves. And you, who are listening to this story, have you ever stopped to consider the small miracles that happen in your life? The doors that open just when you need them, the right people appearing at the exact moments, the solutions that emerge when everything seems impossible.
Perhaps it's time to open your heart's eyes and recognize that we are not alone on this journey, that there is indeed a higher power that cares for us with infinite love, even when our reason insists on denying its existence. Faith, I've discovered, isn't just believing in what you can't see. It's recognizing the divine in what has always been before our eyes, patiently waiting for us to stop trying to explain everything and begin simply giving thanks.